All righty, good evening, everyone. It is 5:05 on Monday, January 13th, 2025, and I'm calling the regular Wausau School District Board of Education to order. Ms. Peck, will you perform the roll call, please?
Okay, Sarah Brock, John Kreischer, Pat McKee, Jennifer Paoli, Joanna Reyes, Jane Roosh, Corey Sillers, Lance Trollope, Jim Boucher.
Here. Thank you. Please join me in stating the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It is the mission of the Wausau School District to advance student learning, achievement, and success. At this point in time, I would like to turn the timeline over to Principal Jennifer Davidson to share a little presentation on Lincoln. Thank you.
Thank you for having me here today. As you can see, I'm Jen Davidson from Lincoln Elementary, and I'm excited to share some of the exciting things that have been happening at our school this year. As part of our Title I Family Engagement Plan, we always like to have a theme, and our theme this year is kind of fitting. We are looking for a puzzle, and part of our puzzle is everybody is in it. The family, the students, our staff, and the community. And then this picture right here we have up in our hallway, and all of the students love to walk by and see themselves and find their teachers, and it's great when families come in and they can see everybody as well. As part of our school goals, family engagement is a huge part. Like I said, we have our puzzle, and you can see with our family Title I family nights, we've done Friendsgiving, we've done an engineering night. Later on this month, we have a math night and puzzles to go back to our theme. We're really just trying to get families in and feel comfortable. We are also working on families to school events because not all families can make it at night, and we want families to see what is happening during the school day. So we've had a math night or a math game day where first grade parents came in. We've had families come in to help with gingerbread houses. Lincoln is culturally diverse, so we try to do a really good job of celebrating all the families in our building. And with Wit and Wisdom, we've had families come in and get to see projects from our 3rd and 5th grade families or students. And then additionally, we collaborate with our PTO, and you can see in the upper right-hand corner that we had a winter dance, and we were working on a fundraiser with Lincoln Blankets. To help with our collaboration and Leader in Me, we created squads this year. And our squads, the purpose is to build relationships, encourage teamwork, and promote student leadership. And our squads are based off of the different grade levels, and each of the squads then created a brag board and a team name. So the names are from the students, and with that brag board, they get to celebrate their brag slips, which are in the upper right corner, and those are based on the 7 Leader in Me habits. We also are working on not just what's happening in our school, but Lincoln is a community where we get a ton of support from the community, and we're trying to teach our kids to give back. So for Q1, we had a penny war for the Humane Society, and our students raised $415 that they were able to give back to the community. For Q2, our Sketch-A Squad had a candy cane sale, and they raised $275 to give to the warming shelter. And those community agencies were chosen by the students. And then we know that a big part of our day is our school academic goals. So for Q2, to be based off of our year-long goal, we are increasing reading to each other or whole class read alouds. And we used the Readopoly board that's up there to track our goal. And students, as of today, have met their Q2 goal, and they read 12,258 minutes, and that surpassed their original goal of 6,000 minutes. So they get to celebrate on Thursday with a school-wide celebration where they get to make me into a human Sunday. Needless to say, the motivation was high. We'll talk to you after Thursday and see how that went. Our quarter 3 goal will then switch to vocabulary to try and increase reading comprehension and fluency. So when we're thinking about Lincoln Elementary, there's some really great things happening, and I'm very proud to be their leader and their principal. And all of this academic and behavioral growth would not be possible with the collaboration of our students, our amazing staff, and the leadership from within the community. So thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate it. Are there any questions or any comments?
Just a comment. I really like the diversity of the activities. Right, you have some geared towards academic, you have some geared towards giving back to the community. I think that's fantastic. And also, I have heard from several people, both in the Lincoln area and just throughout the community, a lot of positive comments about you and the staff and the wonderful job you guys are doing there. So just wanted to pass that along. Thank you.
Okay.
I was gonna say, we should, if we'd have known about that, we would have scheduled this one for next month, so we could have the photos and video.
We'll see what we can do.
Are there any other comments? I guess not. Thank you, Jennifer. Greatly appreciate it. Any speakers for us today? There are none. Okay. Well, with that, moving on to agenda item number 7. Approve the consent agenda. I'm taking a look at appointments, additional staff, replacement staff, contract increases, separations, resignations, contract decreases, terminations, leaves of absence, retirements, minutes, regular session of December 9th, 2024, special session of December 16th, 2024, special session of January 6, 2025, and special session of January 8, 2025. Say that one 5 times real quickly. Payment of bills, budget status, and investment report. Donations to the district. Big list today. Raynard Funeral Home and Cremation Center, Helke Funeral Home, Middle Wisconsin Chefs Association, Don and Joan Smith, Milwaukee Burger Company, Knights of Columbus, Pakaji Services Incorporated, Aspirus Incorporated, Christina Barber, Duncan, Festival Foods, Fraser's Floorings, Hub Central Collision, Tammy Johnson, Mick and Amy Lewis, the Optimist Club of Wausau, Sam's Club of Wausau, Tau Capital Corporation, the Toon family, the Withers family, Jim Zelenka, James D. Greenheck Foundation, Elizabeth Anderson, an anonymous donor, Marathon County Medical Society, Kathleen Seidel, Wausau East Gridiron Club, Don and Carrie Zaromsky, and Roxanne Zaromsky. I'm seeking a motion to approve the consent agenda with great gratitude for donations to the district.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, continuing on. Old and recurring business, there is none. So we're going to move on to agenda item 9A. The board will review the proposed WASB resolutions being brought forward at the WASB Delegate Assembly at 2025 State Education Convention. I'm going to move to a specific addition that I had here. WASB is a member-based organization that depends on the member districts for direction and guidance. At the Delegate Assembly, each region has 2 board members attending the meetings starting in August to prepare the policy resolutions, updates, or changes to be voted on at the convention and the Delegate Assembly. WASB has 15 regions, and with two, we have 30 representatives that are at these meetings getting prepared. Region 5 is represented by Chris Dickinson from Stratford and Shannon Grapko from DC Everest. Ms. Roosh was a representative for a period of time as well, representing Region 5, and served in that capacity. With that, we're taking some time to take a look at resolutions that might be discussed or have direction for our representative to vote on behalf of the district, and our representative is Ms. Roosh. First of all, are there any questions or any comments about any of the 17 resolutions that will be discussed at that time by any of the board members here? Jane, do you have anything that you want to add?
No, they're all pretty basic. Oh, sorry.
They're all pretty basic. There's nothing new. We've been at this for over, 100 years or so? So the resolutions have gotten pretty mundane.
Yeah, most of them are either just minor changes to prior ones or reinstating prior ones. I don't see anything here that we wouldn't want Jane to support.
Right, I didn't see any either as I went through them specifically. I thought they were pretty straightforward, and the committee does a very good job in preparing up to this point in time. And usually there's not going to be a lot of discussion at the delegation with everybody involved, except sometimes people want to get involved with grammar and punctuation and all that kind of stuff. And we've already dealt with that one in the last couple of years, saying let's just move on. So with that, I'm seeking a motion to direct our representative to vote in the affirmative on all of the proposed WASB resolutions on our behalf. Any further questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Jane. We'll see you down at the convention. Moving on. Retirement window extension. Administration, would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, just briefly, administration's coming to the board requesting that we extend the, or open up the retirement window for our teaching staff as well. This is predicated mostly on the consolidation that we'd had, so it gives a chance for teachers to evaluate and assess where they're at. So what we're asking for is for the board to extend the window to, not this Friday, but next Friday, the 24th.
Well, I'm seeking a motion to approve the reopening of the teaching retirement window. Any questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Lance. Appreciate it. All right, next item. Estimate, Josh, you'll be giving us a presentation, I presume, and we'll follow up on some of our earlier discussions pertaining to potential referendum.
I would just add, as Josh begins to present, I just want to make a point of clarity for folks that with consolidation that had just occurred this past Wednesday, the feeling that referendum is following that because we need referendum to occur, that's not true. The consolidation is separate of the referendum. I mean, certainly there's parts of our elementary buildings that are included into the referendum project, but they are mutually exclusive.
Thank you so much. So this will echo what we looked at last week and what we've been talking about for a couple months. But essentially, we're here tonight to talk about operating referendum, capital referendum, possibilities of doing those. Our current financial situation as a district, along with the statewide financial situation, and then a recommendation on what to pursue from the administration. So just to be upfront and clear about this, two types of referendum. Operational referendum can essentially be used to support ongoing operational need, or capital referendum, which can be used in large part for buildings and site improvement, things like that. So we talked about both at the workshop last week, and tonight we're going to focus on operational referendum. The feeling is that is where what we'd like to pursue in terms of a potential referendum this spring. We know that we certainly have capital need. We just had the CISA 10 study that identified a lot of capital need, and there is some potential to do work, capital work within an operating referendum. So it's like that is where we'd like to focus our conversation today. So we aren't alone in the state. There have been, as you can see here, what we're looking at is referendum statistics from across the state over the last couple of years, and you can see that many districts have done exactly what we are proposing doing, and going to the community and asking them to support the vision of the district. So just like districts across the state, that's what we are proposing here tonight. So we've gone over this a lot, but what are our financial concerns as a district? We have decreasing fund balance. Last year we ate about $2 million out of our fund balance, and this year we could do the same thing. We're projecting a little less than that, but it could certainly happen. We have program funding shortfalls or stagnating funding for our student programming. We have a capital maintenance budget that has stayed essentially the same for the last decade. Unclear future of state funding. We know that we have had state funding shortfalls recently, and we don't know if that'll change. We have done below CPI level salary increases for our staff for the last couple of years, and we are not necessarily competitive with substitute employee and event worker staff pay. If there are questions at any point, please feel free to interrupt me and ask those questions. So this is a recent 5-year projection. This is what we looked at last week, showing that this year that we're in about a $775,000 budget deficit. That will go up to around 3.6 next year, somewhere around there, and then increase slightly to somewhere around 4 or 4.5, about 5 years out. I will say that this is probably a conservative estimate, and there's a good chance that 5 years down the road, it could be a higher deficit. We'll also say that there's a lot of unknowns when you're projecting 5 years out. So we prefer to just look at the first couple of years. Before I move on, I should say this projection just kept things status quo. It didn't assume any huge funding increases for anything or anything like that. So we know we just had a meeting last week on the task force, and that a part of their charge was financial concerns and considerations, and that over time, through attrition and having less buildings, we are projecting some savings for the district. So where do we get to in terms of a deficit through savings? What I did here was took the low end of Mark's projected savings, which was $2 million, and applied that over 5 years, assuming we wouldn't realize all the savings up front. So all you're seeing is our projected deficit on the left, less those realized savings. Where would we get in terms of an annual deficit and fund balance? Any questions on this?
Where do we hit the fund balance where we have to start taking loans at the beginning of the school year again? Are we there?
We might hit it next year. I certainly hope not, depending on how this year turns out specific to health insurance. But certainly by the time we got down to around 22 million, we'd have to short-term borrow.
Okay.
And it's something that districts do throughout the state, but it's not something that we as a district have done for a very long time.
Yeah, we did it when I first came on the board.
Okay.
They were doing it, and we worked really hard to get it to the point where we weren't doing that anymore, because that's just lighting money on fire.
Yep, because you have to pay for that money that you're getting. I completely agree. This district's done a great job, and I would say that's a marker of financial health, is not having to short-term borrow. A number of districts around us do. I also want to call out that as we look at the bottom of this, the fund balance as a percentage in those last couple of years is right around 10 or less, and the board policy is that it can't go under 10. And our auditors were here I think, last month and recommended somewhere between 25 and 30% for a healthy district. So we're going to talk a little bit about state funding. Why are we in this? Why are so many districts in this situation? You can see that for a number of years, there was no per pupil revenue limit increases for our school district or any school district across the state. So these last 2 years, we have had $325 per pupil revenue limit increases, but those revenue limit increases were significantly less than the rate of inflation. So I just wanted you to see that that is part of the reason that we're in this situation. We looked at this slide last week, but we've gone in the last 15 years from a state that funds public education above the national average to a state that funds public education below the national average. And when you look at our district specifically, what you're seeing is what have we lost or missed out on compared to inflation through the years. It's a significant number. I think if you add all these numbers up in the last 10 or so years, we're looking at about $46 million. This year alone, if you just compared what inflationary support of the district would be compared to what we have, we're about $11 million short. So now this is an opportunity. So many districts are going to referendum with that, asking for that community support. So this does give our community the opportunity to voice their opinion and give us direction on the direction of the school and what they think we're doing in terms of our financial performance. So there is an opportunity here. What steps has the district taken to be fiscally responsible? We've done significant staffing reductions. Last year it was 25 plus full-time equivalency reduction for this year that we're currently in. As I mentioned previously, we have done 2 straight years of salary increases below CPI. We have static budgets across the district, and we all know that things are costing more and more. So a static budget just means you can't get as much done as you could previously. We did leverage available ESSER funding that was one-time funding, so that money, as of this fall, is gone, cannot be used anymore. You know that we had the elementary task force, so that is something that we are doing to be fiscally responsible. We just had CISA 10 here. They gave a report on the state of our buildings and their needs. So through consolidation, we are projected to save some deferred maintenance and future building improvements. And then we did have a 2021 recurring operating referendum. And I should mention that operating referendum can either be recurring, which means they go on indefinitely, or non-recurring, which means they go on for a set period of time. So really with a deficit budget, we really have 2 options. We can increase our revenues or reduce our spending. So in terms of increasing revenue, immediate things you can do, operating referendum, capital referendum. What can we do to reduce spending? We talked about this. We could move middle school sports to Fund 80. That's something that you'll probably hear more about this spring and summer. We can continue workforce reduction. At some point, that will, of course, impact student programming. We can always look at our compensation model. We are evaluating our footprint. We can reduce program offerings, and we can decrease maintenance spending. What would it look like in terms of timeline to go to operating referendum this spring? We did have a survey last spring on what the community would support. Had an initial report to the board this November, board workshop last week, a special meeting last week on task force recommendations. We have a board meeting tonight and potentially a decision. The deadline to submit a referendum question is January 21st, so it has to be decided on and submitted by then. And then April 1st would be a referendum vote. What could we gain potentially from an operating referendum? Certainly mitigating our budget deficit that we're currently experiencing, the opportunity to maintain and potentially enhance student programming, address ongoing immediate maintenance needs, continued attraction and retention of staff, and potentially we could appropriately fund our health insurance or look at a different solution to control health insurance cost. What are the consequences? What do we stand to lose if we don't go to referendum or referendum fails? Of course, we would try and mitigate impacts on students, but we'd be looking at salary impacts, continued staff reductions, deferring necessary maintenance, reduction in funding for activities and athletics, and impacted student programming in non-core classes.
Do we have an idea of how long we could continue to defer the maintenance on some of these buildings that we still have? I mean, you can only do it for so long. Do we have any idea how long you can keep on kicking that can down the road?
I would say that,
That's a tough question.
yes, when something fails, it becomes an emergency. As an example, I can say that we have roofs on some of our elementary schools that are 20 years past their warranty. So I cannot predict when a roof will fail or a boiler will fail, but when things are past their expected life, I think that's a good sign that things could happen, right?
I didn't really expect an answer on that one.
Yeah.
So I wasn't setting you up for anything, Josh. It just keeps on coming to my mind, how can we deal with things like we have and continue to deal with that and see if we can put things off, because we are going to see some savings down the road here now that we have moved forward on Wednesday with the consolidation of schools. So I'm just putting that out for us to be thinking about, and it's an idea.
Mm-hmm.
But then anytime you have an idea, there's a counter, so.
Right.
So I'm curious to know if the building conditions impact our insurance coverage or rates working in that. I know we non-renew accounts if their roof
Right.
is in that type of condition or their building.
I would say that in general, our buildings certainly need work, and in general, we do an excellent job maintaining them to the best of our abilities. And I don't think any of our buildings are at that point yet, but it's certainly a consideration.
I was curious that on the list of things that could go away, sports wasn't listed and extracurriculars.
So I have reduction in funding for activities and athletics. So it's certainly something that where funding could be reduced.
Okay. And as far as deferring maintenance, when we do it too long, a little problem that would have cost a little becomes a problem that costs much, much more.
Right. I agree. So speaking of maintenance, and kind of the reason we're talking about it so much, you can use an operating referendum to help support ongoing maintenance throughout the district. So what are some things we could do with an operating referendum to improve and maintain our buildings? We could look at district-wide roofing. We can look at district-wide HVAC and air conditioning. John, I know I never got you an answer, but air conditioning would be possible in those two schools. Mass communication updates, camera upgrades, and potentially energy efficiency upgrades. So those are some things that could be done through operating referendum to help support our schools. This is the CISA 10 kind of snapshot of our deferred maintenance. So this is just in the elementary schools, but you can see in the next 5 to 10 years, just for construction costs, they're predicting just south of $28 million in deferred maintenance. We could tackle certainly a chunk of this through operating referendum, but we would try and address the most immediate needs. We have been in contact with them on what they think those most immediate needs are. The other thing we wanted to bring up was that the task force did have recommendations on what to do to some of the schools or how to enhance some of the schools. So they wanted us to consider addressing as many of the 10-year deferred maintenance items as possible at receiver schools and other elementary schools. And they did recommend potentially adding air conditioning at schools where it is not already present, Franklin and John Marshall. Just a little bit about our tax history. What you're seeing is our total levy, so all our funds that we levy for over time. Over the last 10 years, you can see that this year our levy went from $49 million down to around $44 million, so a pretty sizable decrease. And that our levy has been relatively consistent over time, so our tax burden this year on local taxpayers did go down, $5 million. So something we, as a district and as a board, we've done debt defeasance. We have a significant amount of capital debt, and what debt defeasance is essentially saving people money in the long run by prepaying on your debt and avoiding interest payments. So it's a strategy the district has used to quite a bit of success over the last, half dozen years. We've saved taxpayers $8.5 million. So what this means is, by prepaying on the debt, you've created some space. This will get a little complicated. We've created some space within the levy to potentially absorb a small operating referendum without having a tax impact on our local taxpayers. So what we paid this year in Fund 39 levy, which is our capital debt fund, was we levied roughly $22 million. In future years, our principal and interest, so if we were not to prepay, not pay early, would only be between $6 and $7 million, $6 to $8 million. So we've created that gap of about $15 million where we could absorb a potential operating referendum. What this slide is the exact same thing. It's a little blurry, I apologize, but it calls out what you see in orange would be a potential new operating referendum. And you can see that even with an $8 million operating referendum, we would still have somewhere between $6 and $7 million where we could continue defeasing and prepaying debt and helping manage our mill rate and overall tax burden. So this just shows, just shows that we're not projecting at this time, to the best of our knowledge, for this to have any additional tax impact to our taxpayers. We talked about this last week, 3 potential options. Tier 1, kind of just operating expenses only, $4 million a year for 5 years. Tier 2 would allow us to do some amount of deferred maintenance. That's a $6 million for 5-year amount. And then Tier 3 would allow us to tackle maybe some of those bigger projects. Tier 3 is $8 million annually for 5 years. Just wanted to go back to the same slide and highlight that even with the Tier 3 $8 million referendum, we're not projecting any additional tax burden on the taxpayers than what we have this year. So recommendation and next steps, we're recommending the $8 million annually for 5 years. This would be a non-recurring limited duration referendum. So what this will get complicated, but this will look like this is the question that was provided by Quarles and Brady to us. This is the question that we would put to the public in April. And if this is just so I can talk you through this, if this is something the board wanted to act on, we'd have to do 3 potential motions. A motion to modify the resolutions below to declare an amount, and then a motion or resolution on those 2 additional resolutions. So that's all I have. I want to open up for questions from the board.
Questions from board members? We'll just go random at this point in time. Go ahead.
State funding sources in the chart. Are you just assuming the 325 for the next however many years?
Yep. So when we built, I apologize for all the clicking, but when we built this projection, we assumed 325 for the next 5 years. And so this projection we're looking at is certainly neither a best case or worst case scenario, as we don't know what that funding will be.
This chart got better from last week. A little.
I'm hoping this is the same. I hope this is the same chart.
Okay. Because I thought last week's number had 4 million.
I just have a few comments. And first of all, thank you, Josh, for putting this together. I think it's very informative and very clear, hopefully for the public to understand, A, the need, and B, kind of how we would get there and the impact of it. But just, I guess, a few comments for people to consider as they're reviewing this and potentially between now and April is that I just want to reiterate that the district has been extremely fiscally responsible over the last, you can see from the charts, over the last 10 to 12 years. A 19% reduction in mill rate is no small feat. That stuff doesn't happen by accident, and that really is the result of good planning, good execution, and the community coming through with other referendums, frankly, to keep up on those maintenance items that Jim was referring to earlier. Secondly, that just to remind people too, and I talked to a few folks in the last few weeks that still don't realize this is the method through which school districts get funding. Okay, aside from the state, and the state can say yes or no, we can get, more or less from the state. When we need additional funding, the way that the process is set up, we have to go to the taxpayers, which is the way it should be. I mean, ultimately, the taxpayers have the say in terms of what we're going to spend. We are not like a municipality where we can vote to just raise taxes and boom, we have more revenue or what have you. So we are absolutely reliant on the electorate within our district, to be able to support us when needed. And I think that the information that Josh has shown is that, there's clearly a need for this. Third, and I mentioned this at the meeting last week regarding the consolidation, this is an ongoing part of our strategy for the district. This is the next, the non-recurring referendum is that 5-year gap, if you will, between now and when we're going to be realizing all, the efficiencies from consolidating our footprint. So this isn't intended to be an ongoing fund, that we're going to be able to do, whatever we want with. It really is designed for some very specific needs, as well as capital and maintenance items. But this is part of a plan. This isn't something that we just woke up from and said, oh, hey, let's go ahead and ask for $6 or $8 million for the heck of it. And lastly, just to reemphasize, and I don't say this as any kind of a doom and gloom or anything of that nature, but we are at the point now, and I think that the slide, Josh, that you showed relative to when we're dipping into the fund balance, we're at the point where every decision that we're going to have to make is going to impact students in some way, shape, or form. And that's a connection, again, in conversations that I've had with folks, that's not always understood. Some people, someone sent me a screenshot of a comment somewhere on social media. I'm not a big follower of it, but they said, well, just cut board members' salaries and that's going to take care of the deficit. And then I quickly did the math for him and said that'll get you $27,900 a year. So if you're relying on that for us to not have to go into fund balance.
And I did figure out we get about 25 cents an hour.
It is, 25 cents an hour. So we're well below minimum wage. But anyway, it just goes to show, I think, some of the understandings and some of the misconceptions that are out there. But we are at the point, again, and Jane mentioned it, right? There's going to be potentially, if we have to cut more, it's things like class offerings, course offerings, class sizes, right? We may have to adjust our policies for elementary class sizes if we have to continue to cut staff so we can stay, within our stated policies. Arts, athletics, clubs, like the DECA club, Kale, that you just said you went over and judged. We have 130 some kids in there, those are all things that we want to and absolutely need to be able to continue to support, because that, it's not just the reading, writing, math, et cetera. We all understand that it's those other activities that really make for the whole experience of a student. But that's the point we're at. Again, if we don't do anything, we're going to be talking about cuts and impacts in those types of areas. It's no longer, we're just not going to be able to afford, colored paper in the classrooms. We're well beyond that. So I guess that's, in summary, I support what we're talking about. I know we're going to land on a number, but having been here for 13 years now, I can say with absolute confidence that this is needed. We have been responsible, and there is definitely a plan that has been contemplated leading up to this in terms of how that money will be used. So.
John?
I agree, Pat. I mean, part of what you said is we didn't wake up yesterday and decided that we needed to ask for money. There's been a plan, and when we had the large referendum and pulled money out, about, I think it was $60 million, knowing that some things needed to happen in this district to address our footprint, to be fiscally responsible, that step has been taken. There are probably more steps that will have to be taken, out into the future. I can't predict what that will be, but this book is a lot of deferred maintenance projects, and it's doors and windows, it's concrete, it's HVAC systems, something that I happen to have an expertise in, and I've seen some of our HVAC systems, and I applaud our facilities folks for limping 25 to 40-year-old HVAC systems along. It's incredible. So there's a lot of things that came out of that 60 million. I think we've taken the right steps in what we did last week, and this operating referendum I think is the next logical step and has been a part of the plan and process.
Sarah, go ahead.
First, I don't think we can overstate the fact that what we're asking for is not going to increase anybody's taxes. Or at least we have the ability to say, we're going to take this money and not increase taxes. I think that is something that people really need to understand. Second, just to echo and in agreement with what both Pat and John have said, and maybe just use slightly different words, we're not asking for an increase in our allowance to buy shiny new shoes or fancy new things or anything like that. What we're asking, truthfully, is for the community's trust. Because we're not asking them to increase their taxes. We're asking them to trust us to utilize the money that they're giving us in the most effective way to help our students and to give them the best possible education. We're not asking to increase their bills. We're asking them to work with us to create the kind of district that they want to see. Whether that's arts, athletics, academics, programs, our incredible staff, whatever it might be, we're asking them to think about what they want the Wausau School District to look like and then work with us to create it.
Anything on this side?
So my question is, the referendum, it's not going to impact our taxes. So if you could just, I'm trying to understand how it won't increase our taxes. Where will that money come from if it's not being paid for by our taxes?
Good question. Thank you. So what we've done in Fund 39, our previous capital referendums came with a considerable amount of debt, and we have to pay that debt off, and we pay that by levying for that money to then apply to that debt. The board and the district have chosen to save taxpayers money in the long term by prepaying on that debt, so paying ahead of time. So what you're looking at between the orange bar and the kind of brick bar is what we levied for and are applying this year versus what our required principal and interest payments are next year and for the subsequent 2 years. So that difference, that $15.4 million is roughly the space that we have to absorb a operating referendum somewhere in the $4 to $8 million range without necessarily impacting taxes. This slide shows the impact of that referendum, assuming no increase to the levy from this year to future years with an $8 million operating referendum. We would still, the prediction and the model is that we would still have some space to continue prepaying our debt and continue saving taxpayers money in the long term.
This is very similar to mortgages when you pay a couple times during the month versus waiting once. Sometimes you get to the point because you've gotten ahead of your schedule, you can say, okay, wait a minute, I don't need to continue to do that. How about if I use that money for something else? That leads to my question, because some people are going to come back and ask that, do you need to continue to take the debt down so fast? And if we would say, well, we could stop and just do it on a plan that we planned, what's the negative of that, Josh? Because they need to know the positive, they need to know the negative of that.
It is certainly a strategy. It would cost more in interest over the long term, but it is certainly a strategy. You can, of course, make minimum payments on your debt. You're just going to pay a lot more in interest in the long term.
And we've done a tremendous job. Pat, you've been here for, like you said, 13 years. Jane, you've been here for 15, if I'm not mistaken. You start taking a look at the fact that if you can bring that debt down faster, that interest is not going to kill you down the road. And not knowing where interest is going and how it's going to go in the future, we could be hit harder by waiting on that. But it's a discussion point that needs to be brought up, and people need to be aware of that and start thinking about what do we do from here. That's all I wanted to bring up, just bring it up and for us to maybe finalize what we want to do here.
Josh, can I ask you about the savings chart? The assumptions,
Which savings chart? Sorry.
right, yeah, from this consultation.
Oh, yeah.
Right
yeah.
after your
Yep.
draft. That's like assuming normal operational costs of the buildings. This doesn't assume anything for like selling any properties and, right? Okay.
No, right. No one-time revenue increases from the sale of a building were factored in here. I would say that in general, schools don't sell for a ton of money.
Right.
So, even if they did, that's a one-time thing.
Mm-hmm. Does this chart also assume like any increases in wages or anything else, or is this just what our numbers are right now?
So I will say that it's built off of this. I took the surplus/deficit line, so the top line within the red box, and moved it over to the leftmost projected annual deficit column. And then I took the lower end of Mark's attrition and building operational savings amount and thought conservatively that we would realize that over 5 years. I will say that there's potential that we may not even realize all of that amount simply because over time your costs are growing, right?
Even if it's just inflation.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So,
Which wasn't my point of
yep,
asking the question.
it's maybe slightly too simple.
Yeah. Okay.
Just one other comment, and to understand what referendums are, because it is under local control. As Pat alluded to earlier, it's a local control thing, and as you pointed out, with the amount of years, and that goes back years than what we just had on that one time schedule, the state did not have any increase at all for schools around the state, and it was at a very low amount. You can go back probably another 5 years when it started. So we have just finally gotten the states to give money in 2019, 2020, through 2021, and this was a big windfall. People need to realize it was a big windfall, this 2023, 24, and then coming into this year. That's big. That was huge. People may look at all of this, and everybody needs to understand, we're really coming to the community to ask, do you agree with this? And we're putting the question in front of you. It's kind of like a survey for all practical purposes, what a referendum is. A referendum is not just give us money. It's actually a question to the community to say, yes, go ahead. Or no, we don't want you to. Figure it out with what you have. So actually, we're asking the community to help us on this decision in moving forward, putting the question together, putting it out there for the amount that we are suggesting, and I'm not sure what that is. I'm not sure what that money is going to be. But it's a question, and I would like our community to really help us in making this decision. My final comment. Any others? All right, so with that, I presume we have 3 motions. This has changed a little bit, so we need to take a look at it. First of all, we got to decide how much money, correct? That's got to be probably the discussion point here for the board. How much money are we going to go? You had level 1, level 2, and level 3. You had 4, 6, and 8, correct?
Correct, and I should,
Reminder.
yep, 4, 6, and 8 were the amounts given the 3 tiers. I should clarify that the way the resolutions were drawn is that if it is outside of the 4 to 8 million mark, we would have to repost and have another meeting. So, just so you know.
So what's the direction you want us to give you? What do you want us to give you right now?
So the recommendation that we set forth was the 8 million annually for 5 years. The next step would be for the board to discuss and decide what amount, if any, they would support. And then that would be the first motion.
Let's discuss that. We need to discuss how much we're going to ask for on this referendum. 4, 6, or 8.
Given everything that we've gone over, both last week and this week now, I would support the 8 million for the reasons that, again, Josh outlined, because it can be done within that same bucket of money and not have the impact on taxes. That 8 million also gives us the flexibility to be able to start addressing some of those maintenance items at whatever level we can when the rest of the bills are paid, so to speak. So the timing is right, and where we are at within our, kind of a 10-year budget cycle is very right. So I would support the 8 million.
Okay. Others?
I agree with Pat. I support the administration's recommendation of 8 million over 5 years, and I applaud the board that came before me as the newbie for putting us in a position to be able to do that without impacting the taxes of our constituents. I think it's our best bet to create the district we're trying to create.
John?
I agree.
Going around. Corey?
I think the capital stuff should be separated out and planned out for in a couple of years and have it separate. This is my own comment.
Follow-up comments over here on the amount putting forth?
It's a big number. 8 is a big number, but I think if we can do it in a way that doesn't impact the taxpayers and with transparency, and I think trust was a big word that we talked about last week, with changing the footprint and just being good stewards of the taxpayer dollars and looking for efficiencies on our part.
It's very difficult for me. I've been going back and forth looking at these charts for the last week. either going for the 8 or going for the middle. Well, I'm getting kind of a nod here, so let's put 8 on that. And that first motion would be seeking a motion to modify resolutions, am I correct in that? 9.C.1 and 9.C.2 to reflect $8 million.
Second.
Can this be a roll call? Can all three be a roll call?
Absolutely.
Thank you, hold on. Okay, Sarah Brock?
Yes.
John Creasure?
Yes.
Pat McKee?
Yes.
Jennifer Paoli? Jane Roosh?
Yes.
Joanna Reyes?
Yes.
Corey Sillers?
No.
Jim Boucher?
No. Okay. Motion carries. Motion carries. All right, next item. We have a second motion then. Check me if I'm correct here. I'm seeking a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the school district budget to exceed revenue limit by $8 million per. Let me see, it continues on. Per year for 5 years for non-recurring.
So moved.
Second.
All right, follow-up questions? Or comment? I would just like to make a comment about the fact that this is a 5-year non-recurring, and that means that in 5 years, we'll come back and take a look at this, and the community will have a lot of input I'm sure at that point in time, and it's a double check to make sure that we are going in the right direction. So I would like the community to really remember that when they're voting on this. Okay? Roll call?
Sarah Brock?
Yes.
John Creasure?
Yes.
Pat McKee?
Yes.
Jennifer Paoli?
Yes.
Joanna Reyes?
Yes.
Jane Roosh?
Yes.
Corey Sillers?
No.
Jim Boucher?
Yes. Okay. Next resolution. I'm seeking a motion to approve the resolution providing for a referendum election on the question of the approval of a resolution authorizing the school district budget to exceed the revenue limit by $8 million per year for 5 years for non-recurring purposes.
So moved.
Second.
Any other follow-up questions on this motion? Follow-up comments?
Can I just clarify? So, Corey, your comment, and I assume the reason you're voting no is that you said to split, you'd prefer to see the capital dollars split out into a future referendum? Because this doesn't preclude us from doing that. It would only decrease the amount of that future capital referendum.
That's kind of a yes on 2 points. Probably I'm saying I don't agree with the 8 million. I also think that some of our capital improvements should be put into a capital referendum, however many years out that is. Yes.
Okay. And just to be clear for everybody, that can still happen. This doesn't tie our hands. Josh, correct? I mean, if we decide after the elementary consolidation that we need, I'm going to make a number up, $20 million to complete A, B, and C, we can still do that. It's just that 20 million may have been 28 million because we've used some of this money over those 3 years or whatever it would be to bring that number down.
That is exactly correct,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Yep.
It's a good point. Thank you for bringing it up because it does make a difference, breaking it down and breaking it out like that. Any other comments? Okay, roll call.
Sarah Brock?
Yes.
John Creasure?
Yes.
Pat McKee?
Yes.
Jennifer Paoli? Joanna Reyes? Jane Rush?
Yes.
Corey Sillers?
No.
Jim Boucher?
Yes. Motion carries. All right. Josh, are you up again for this? I believe the next item is, as we continue to go through here, approve the 2023-24 audit report. Estimated. Chuck Krieger from Hawkins Ash CPAs presented at the last meeting. He's not going to be here to present. Do you have any additional items that you want to share?
I do not.
All right, I'm seeking a motion to recommend the approval of the 2023-2024 audit report as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, next item. We're looking at Wendy Cartledge will present the open enrollment space determinations for 2025-2026.
And I presented for Wendy at our last meeting, no new information to report.
Okay. I'm going to seek a motion approval of the regular and special education non-resident spaces available under open enrollment for the 2025-2026 school year as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Agenda item 10. Are there any board professional growth items that would like to be talked about at this point in time by any of the board members?
So I don't have a professional growth item, but I have promised the Wausau School Foundation on behalf of John to remind all of you to come to the comedian night to help fund the Wausau School Foundation and support our students and our teachers.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Sarah. All right, if not, if we don't have anything else, I'm going to continue on going to Mr. Sillers, who will deliver legislative liaison update.
The only thing, and I didn't notice it being available or held last year, is WASB's having a legislative day, March 12th in Madison. And I will see about being able to participate in that. Hopefully my calendar will allow to go down and talk about school items with the legislators. So that's all I have.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Continuing on, I would like the written report for liaison activity report to be entered in the official record. Oh, excuse me. Mr. Bushman.
I was prepared to move
Coming
on.
right down there. I was giving you some time. Getting the favors switched around.
I'll stay very brief. From an administrative perspective, we've really have shifted gears, and we are planning now for the consolidation efforts that we have. Our administrative team has been able to get into all of the impacted buildings to speak with staff. We're very cognizant of the human aspect of this one, and we've been very clear with folks that families, students, staff, that this process, we want to do this with them and not to them. So we're excited for the possibilities. We started talking about how fantastic it would be to do Hawthorne Hills Alumni Night, and they can walk tour the building, put up bulletin boards for remembrances. So we're excited about some of the positive things that we have coming forward this year.
Tremendous. Thank you. I'm seeking a motion to enter closed session to discuss Red Granite Charter School contract evaluations according to statutes 19.851 EG. So moved. Roll call, please.
All right, Sarah Brock? Yes. John Creasher?
Yes.
Pat McKee?
Yes.
Jennifer Paoli? Joanna Reyes? Jane Rush? Corey Sillers?
Yes.
Lance Trollope?
Yes.
Jim Boucher?
Yes. Thank you.